Now, Professor Hal Lee is a very famous professor over in America, and he held a conference last year. Now, Professor Hal Lee has been a forward thinker in supply chain management for as long as I've been in the profession, so at least 20 years, writing on the subject. And interestingly, last year he launched a conference which was very different to any other conference that he's launched in the past. And the reason I'm flagging it here is because he's really taking this sustainability agenda as an indication that supply chain managers need to think differently about how they actually run their supply chains. So he threw the gauntlet out there and wanted speakers to come from all around the world, really addressing the point he put up there. But actually, grasping hold of sustainability is the way out of the economic recession. We can do something really creative and different now, because when your backs are against the wall in an economic recession, we know what we were doing previously isn't working. We have to do things differently. So his point is, don't be frightened about the current situation. This is the point where we can become far more creative. So he really sort of threw the gauntlet down. And really from that conference on, we're seeing a lot more work come out about this issue of sustainability and the impact it will have on our supply chain strategies and how we need to think differently in the way we look at business. Professor Martin Christopher, again another leading professor in thinking from Cranfield University, now retired but still emeritus professor for Cranfield University, really sort of brought up this idea of resilience. And this idea, resilience has two components to it. It has the sustainability component, but also survival of the future. And that's what most of us are here for. We want to be in companies that are surviving for the future. So what do we need to do differently? And his challenge is, think about resilience and robustness. What do we need to do to take our organisations into the future? And his challenge is, we need to do things differently. Okay, so we need these resilient supply chains, and the focus being is we can no longer operate in isolation. Whether you like it or not, you are in a global supply chain. Most of us, even if we don't recognise it on our day-to-day, if you actually go and look at your cradle-to-grave supply chain, you are in a global supply chain. And we are not in small silos that are protected from what's going around. Taking all this on board, and to really address the question Colin wanted me to look at, was, so how do we go about creating excellence? Well, I've got no answers for you, and I increasingly frustrate my students when they come to my classroom, because my classroom is always about there is no answer. There cannot be one single answer for every one of you in the room, for every one of your organisations, for every one of the situations your organisations are in. But there are some key things we can think about. And going back to my previous slide about what has excellence meant in the 1980s, the 1990s, now I don't know about you, but I look at that slide and okay, there are terms that you've met along your career path, but none of them are necessarily wrong. We're not saying they're not needed now. Okay? It's more about focusing on what it is we need to do in our day-to-day, which is why I'm going to have to apologise to Colin here, because I wanted to come today with some real new nugget of information I could lay out there and you could all run away with, and news from 2011 conference. But actually, Marshall Fisher said it in 1997, and I think it holds so true for today. But actually what's important is, what is your marketplace doing, and you align your supply chain to match the needs of that marketplace. Because you can't control your marketplace. Your marketplace is what you're serving. And therefore, by understanding the dynamics of your marketplace, that is the key thing you should be aligning your strategies to, your supply chain to, and your response to. Because after all of us in this room are about matching supply and demand. That is fundamentally what our roles are about. So that demand pattern is present in every single supply chain. It is that marketplace. Doesn't matter where you are in the supply chain, that's what you need to be looking at. Because misunderstanding of the dynamics of your marketplace is the single reason why a lot of organisations make a huge mistake with deciding what excellence is. And unfortunately, the biggest driver of that is the buzzword. And that's the most dangerous point. Because the buzzword is almost seduces you to really think, oh, someone's found a solution, that's the one for me. But if it doesn't match your marketplace, there's a real danger to actually trying to adopt that strategy as a point of excellence for your own organisation. And I want to just quickly take that through. Because what happens, and we see it time and again, is when there's a mismatch of what you believe is your strategy versus what your marketplace dynamics are, you drive inefficiencies into the system. And unfortunately, especially when they're driven by a buzzword, you may genuinely believe you are doing the right things. Now, some of you in this room will have felt this. You have a huge drive, your strategy, you're rolling it out. Just in time is a classic example. You roll out just in time, everyone waits for the miracle to happen when excellence just rolls through your door. And you know what? Just in time becomes a nightmare to run, to operate, and if you actually do the supply chain management financials, you realise it's actually costing you money to operate it. And this is where the problems arise. So where do you start? Well, you start fundamentally by understanding the marketplace dynamics that you operate within. And what I mean by that is you go out to the point of customer and you work out what the demand pattern is. And that's not always easy. I appreciate for some of you in the room, even identifying who your customer is can be a task in itself, okay? But you need to have some indication of what kind of marketplace you're operating in, and then you align the supply chain strategy to meet that. For example, a volatile demand pattern, a highly unpredictable, rapidly changing marketplace dynamics, means you should really focus on responsiveness as the driver to your supply chain strategy. Now, responsiveness means that sometimes you may have to spend money just to have the ability to respond in the system that you may not use at all times, but it's important to the way that you do business. That gives you your competitive advantage. So a responsive driven strategy should be aligned to an agile type environment. However, if your demand pattern is relatively predictable and you have a relatively stable marketplace, then what you're looking at is efficiency as a driver. And therefore things like lean are appropriate. Now, I'm not going to ask a straw poll, but what we find is if we get called into a company that's got problems, more often than not it's because they've tried to put a lean strategy in an environment that actually needs an agile strategy. If you try and put lean on top of agile of a volatile marketplace, it won't work. And that's the problem we see. Companies go for a buzzword, but it's not necessarily the strategy they really need. Okay? Now, I don't know about you, but I've never worked in a company that's had a single market and a single product and a single service. So the reality is most of us are operating in organisations where there isn't one supply chain strategy that fits all of what we do. So we may well find, and this is where your jobs get more difficult, is you're actually trying to juggle and run multiple strategies at different times for your different products and services across your industry. So it's about identifying those key customers, working out the marketplace demand, and then working out the appropriate strategy to align to actually meet the needs of that market. Now, hopefully, I'm way on time for Colin. My final thoughts, I just wanted to pick out some final thoughts. There's a fantastic writer out there called John Katorna who wrote a book called Living Supply Chain, which, if I could urge any of you to read, that would be the book to read, because it really takes this view that no two supply chains are the same, and they're actually systems of people. So this idea that you can control and manage is maybe the wrong view, and we should be far more flexible, adaptable to allow us to respond and change the market. And if the economic recession and sustainability are our future, and the things we have to, we don't know where those things are going. We're going to have to be adaptable. So John Katorna last year said, we must move beyond designing a static solution to actually designing our supply chains to allow us to be dynamic to changes that may happen in our marketplaces. Who knows where the consumers are going to go? Who knows what the results of the end of the economic recession is going to be? We need to make sure that we are enabling our organisations to flex, move and flow with the marketplaces that we have. And then as a final point, I just wanted, because I feel a little bad at giving you a Marshall Fisher quote earlier on from 1997, because Marshall Fisher is a big thinker out there and he's writing papers all the time, so I thought I'd better do him a good deed. And so I went and saw what he wrote on the 26th of January. And interestingly, he's aligning with what I was talking about today, so I thought, good job, I'll put that one in. And what he was saying is, again, you need to be adaptable. You cannot assume the business moving forward means you can have one strategy to cover all your products and services to run your supply chain. And he identifies that we're moving into a world where we're going to have slow-moving markets and fast-moving markets. The slow-moving market in many respects being the Western economy, and the fast-moving market is very much the Eastern economy. And we've got to be able to respond to those changes in the marketplace. So thank you very much, and questions at the end.